Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a discussion regarding the suggestions exhorted by the Prime Minister in order to deal with the implications on the domestic economy amid the West Asian geopolitical crisis. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion regarding the scenario of logistics sectors in India, the associated challenges, and the way forward. Then in the prelims pointer section, we'll have a discussion regarding 5 different topics from a special perspective of the upcoming UPSC prelims examination 2026 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is about will Prime Minister's suggestions work? In the last 1 decade, what we have been witnessing is the rise of anti-globalization trends. There has been the rise of far-right nationalist parties in various countries. And there has been a voice that globalization should be stopped. And primarily this has been from the advanced economies, for example, the US. But the reality is that still we are living in a hyper-globalized world. What it means is that any event which takes place in one part of the world has one or the other implication or ramification on the other part. Especially once we talk about a country like India, what you'll have to understand is that we are highly connected to the world, and highly connected. In addition, we are highly dependent on the world for a few of the major things. India is one of the largest importers of its energy needs. Once we talk about the crude oil, once we talk about the LPG, the LNG supplies, India is one of the largest importers of fertilizers. India is one of the largest importers of gold. Now, we already know what is happening in West Asia. There has been a turmoil. We are witnessing a war between Iran on one hand and Israel and US on the other. And this has significantly impacted various countries around the world, including India. In that context, we have Prime Minister who has basically suggested, who has exhorted the people of India to follow certain steps. Now, we have this particular column which has been published in the Hindu, where it talks about the efficacy, whether this particular framework of the suggestions given by the Prime Minister, would it work on the ground? And what is the real issue? Are we focusing upon the real issue? Are we targeting the roots? Because see, these measures which Prime Minister has talked about, definitely they may have one or the other results. But are we targeting the real issue? That's what the question is. So we'll talk about what these suggestions are, what is the macroeconomic condition right now, and what all measures India should adopt, right? And we'll have a way forward. Very important, especially in the context since the voice has been given by Prime Minister. This automatically becomes very important. This is a topic which is interdisciplinary, talks about GS2 aspect, deals with the GS2 aspect, deals with the Indian economy aspect of GS3, and also the energy aspect. So we have the 7 set of suggestions that the Prime Minister has called for. He has asked the Indians, he has asked the people to basically follow that. We'll see that. Now, what is the context? Why is the government asking the citizens to cut the consumption? So primarily in one way, what Prime Minister is saying is that you reduce the consumption, overall consumption. And as I told you that India is a country which is highly dependent on the world for some of its crucial needs, energy, fertilizers, gold. So therefore this becomes very important. Now, we have the ongoing conflict in West Asia. Now, that is what you'll have to understand. There are certain choke points. In geopolitics, there are certain choke points. Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. Let's talk about the Strait of Malacca, right? So these are geopolitical choke points. Anything which happens at this particular location has severe implications on various countries. We have the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Strait of Hormuz, what you'll have to understand is almost 25% of the global crude oil supplies, and including the LNG supplies, they basically pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And we know that we have the IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, and now also the US Army, who at one point of time or the other, they imposed a naval blockade. And because of that, the supplies of the crude oil and the LNG has been affected. Now, what it has led to is a severe increase in the global crude oil prices. Last year, the global crude oil prices, the Brent crude, it was almost to the tune of $65 per barrel. Okay? And now it has increased to almost 110. Can you imagine? Almost doubled. And the peak was at almost 120 US dollars per barrel. So India is already dependent for a huge chunk of supply of the crude oil from these countries, and the prices have significantly increased, right? So therefore, it has a burden. It has an effect on the overall macroeconomic stability of India. Then let's talk about gold prices. Gold prices have increased a lot. Now, India is a country which is a very big importer of gold. And we'll talk about the reasons also. In India, there is a cultural demand of gold, whatever the Prime Minister may say. But you'll have to understand that people have obsession with gold. And therefore, what ultimately happens is that we have been importing a lot of gold. And therefore, it has an effect on the overall macroeconomic stability. Let's talk about the Indian rupee. And that is what even the opposition has been bringing to the fore. Last year, we had, and this is again a very important point, we had the exchange rate. It was almost 85 per US dollar. And now this has increased to almost 96 per dollar. God forbid that it should not touch 100, it should not create a century. Let's hope so. But according to the trend, what we are witnessing, that may be a possibility. So what we are trying to say is that the exchange rate is on a downside. We are witnessing that Indian rupee is weakening at a great pace, and therefore this does not augur well for the overall macroeconomic stability. And therefore what we are also witnessing is that there is an increasing aspect of current account deficit. Now this is also, let me give a brief with respect to the current account and the capital account. See, we have the balance of payment, right? And we primarily have two types of account. One is a current account and the other is the capital account. Now, current account is the one which primarily deals with the regular aspects. For example, the trade in goods and services, right? The incomes and the dividends what we receive. So this tells us the short-term picture. Whereas a capital account, it basically talks about the aspects of the assets and liabilities of a nation, primarily in terms of the investments which we are doing, primarily in terms of the borrowing which we are going for. So this reflects the long-term aspect. Now, what you'll have to understand is, now this includes the trade in goods as well as services. Since the value of rupee is depreciating, we have to pay more of rupees, right, to get converted into dollars. And what we are witnessing is that the price of the crude oil is also increasing, the gold price is also increasing. So there is a kind of multiple factors are playing a role over here. And ultimately what we are witnessing is that we are basically using a lot of forex reserves. And also the Indian rupee is depreciating. And this is ultimately what is leading to is that we are witnessing increasing deficit in the current account, what we call as the current account deficit. So the current account deficit is increasing at a rapid pace, which is obviously not a good thing for a country like India, because we already know what happened in 1991, the balance of payment crisis, right? So what you'll have to understand is, since India is a country which is a great importer, a huge importer of gold, energy needs, fertilizers. Let me talk about the fertilizers. So you must be aware of diammonium phosphate. You must be aware of muriate of potash. We have almost 100% dependency as far as these two types of fertilizers are concerned. Urea, we have self-sufficiency, but once we talk about the potassium aspect, once we talk about the phosphorus aspect, we have almost a complete dependency. And another thing what you will have to understand is that once we talk about the domestic manufacturing of these chemical fertilizers, there is a requirement of the feedstock, which is primarily the natural gas. So natural gas prices have also increased. And there are also issues with the supply of the natural gas. So obviously that is having an effect on the overall fertilizer production in India. And we are having these agricultural cycles, Kharif season, which is going to come. So therefore, this would have an effect on the agricultural productivity also, if we do not have adequate supplies of fertilizers, right? So that is the whole context in which the Honorable Prime Minister has talked about the behavioral and policy push. And he has also showed this in terms of the reduction, almost 50% reduction in his convoy. Similarly, we have the Honorable Home Minister who has shown this. And most of the chief ministers of the BJP ruled states, they are following the footstep of Honorable Prime Minister. So let's see how things go. But ultimately, what you'll have to understand is that there is a kind of the role being played by behavioral economics. What we talk about is the nudge. So over here, the Prime Minister is nudging the population to basically adopt these measures. That's the whole overall context. Now, what the Honorable Prime Minister has talked about. He has said that we need to have more of work from home. And ultimately, so that we can basically reduce the travel, we can reduce that commute time and the energy which are used, right? So that is what he has talked about. He has said that we need to use more of public transport. We should rely more on the electric vehicles, not those vehicles which are based on the ignition, right? Which basically consume the petrol or the diesel. So he's talked about the electric vehicles, he's talked about the carpooling, right? Next, we have reduced use of petrol and diesel. Obviously, since we are importing a lot of these, important commodities from abroad, therefore, he has asked that to cut the usage so that we can reduce the import bill, right? Then cut down the cooking oil. And this is something which you'll have to understand. We are also dependent on the cooking oil. Most of the needs with respect to the palm oil, they're sourced from the Southeast Asian countries of Malaysia and Indonesia. So that is also one of the great concerns. Then avoid buying gold for 1 year. So this is what the Prime Minister has said, that you should not buy gold for 1 year. Okay, but still, as I told you, that there is a kind of a behavioral inclination of people towards gold. And therefore, it's really very difficult in a country like India to stop. And we'll talk about the numbers. I'll tell you that we haven't seen, there has been a great increase in the price of the gold in the last 1 year, but still we haven't seen the commensurate reduction in the overall imports, right? Buy Indian made products. And this is something which is really important. And this is something which is really practicable, which we'll have to focus upon. He always talks about, Prime Minister always talks about vocal for local, indigenous manufacturing, be it different sectors. For example, we have also come up with the GI tags. We have come up with one district, one product. So this is again very, very important. Use natural fertilizers instead of the imported chemical fertilizers, or instead of those chemical fertilizers which are manufactured in India, using the natural gas which is imported. Now, see, we'll also talk about this. This is really difficult in a country like India, which has witnessed green revolution. And in one way or the other, the farmers are completely dependent on these chemical fertilizers, right? Reduce foreign travel. And this is what the Honorable Prime Minister has said, that we need to reduce the foreign travels, right? So this is what you'll have to understand. Now, why are these measures necessary? Let's talk about the overall macroeconomic indicators, on the basis of macroeconomic indicators. The very first is global energy crisis. See, there has been oil price shock. You already know that. The prices have almost doubled from $65 per barrel to almost $110 per barrel. Now, this for a country like India is a huge burden, because most of our supplies, they are primarily dependent on the imports, and we pay a huge amount as far as the overall import of crude oil and natural gas is concerned. So if the prices would rise, obviously the import bill is going to rise, and that would have an effect on the current account, right? We'll have more of the deficit in the current account. India's vulnerability. Why? Because of the total import bill which we have, almost 17% is attributed to oil and gas. Imagine kariye aap. Just think about the scenario where almost 17% which we are paying to the world is for our energy needs, primarily oil and the gas. So this is again a very serious thing which you'll have to understand. Now, what can be the implications? See, the implications can be in the form of, if we are having more of the imports, if the prices are increasing, it can create a vicious cycle, which would ultimately lead to the depreciation of rupee. The value of rupee would basically go down. And once the value of rupee would go down, what we'll have to understand is we'll have to pay more of rupees for the subsequent imports. Okay? And once we are paying more of rupees, we also have this phenomenon of imported inflation. We are importing the inflation. And that would have effect on the final price of the commodity. Okay? And understand that ultimately it is the low socio-economic strata of the society which bears the brunt. The rich would not have any issue with this, would hardly be affected. But primarily the low socio-economic strata would be affected by this price rise. So that is what you'll have to understand. Import bill would rise, we'll have the depreciation of rupee, and ultimately we'll have the imported inflation. Surge in gold imports. Now, what you'll have to understand is Prime Minister has said that avoid buying gold for 1 year. But there is one particular theory in economics which says that whenever you have the periods of crisis, whenever you have any of these events taking place, people see gold as the safest investment option. Its price may rise, may double, may triple. That does not matter. But people view gold as a very serious, a very important asset. It's a kind of a safe haven asset. And especially in Indian scenario, एक reason तो ये हो गया. There's one particular reason that it is the most important asset, alternative asset. Second reason what you'll have to understand is that in India, we don't have a regular demand of gold. Regular, I mean to say that there are no as such, there is one specific reason, and that is attributed to the cultural demand of gold. You talk about any of the ceremonies in any of the religion in India, gold plays a very important role over there, right? And therefore, since we have the Indian parents, they invest all of their life savings on their children's marriage. So in that particular case scenario, even if the gold price doubles or triples, that would have hardly any effect on the buying of gold. It may reduce a bit since Prime Minister has exhorted, and there are many followers of Prime Minister. People value what he says. So therefore, what we'll have to understand is that there may be a dip in the overall gold which we are importing. But again, that is something which is almost impracticable. Why? Because there is a cultural demand of gold. Now, result, as I said, that this would lead to, and there are numbers for this. Now, what you'll have to understand is that the price of gold, and I'm trying to elaborate the numbers over here, it has increased in the last 1 year by almost 45 to 60%. Okay? Prices have increased by almost 45 to 60%. But the import of the gold from the other countries to India, it has only reduced by 5%. Can you imagine? Prices have almost doubled, but the import has only reduced by 5%. And this 5% is primarily because of those people who don't have the economic capacity to buy gold, primarily the low socioeconomic strata. Still, it means that people are buying gold at a rapid pace. So this is something which is a concerning point. Now, next aspect is rupee depreciation. And this is what the opposition has been saying again and again, that Prime Minister of India would make the rupee to go for a century. If the macroeconomic stability is not kept in mind, this would really happen. So what you'll have to understand is exchange rate, it is plummeting, it is going down. Initially, it was 85. Last year, it was around 85 rupees per dollar. Now it is almost 96. So this is a grave concern, especially for a country like India, which has a huge import basket. So if we are spending more of rupees for that particular dollar, because the demand of the dollar is increasing, so its value would also increase, and therefore there would be a commensurate reduction in the value of depreciation in the value of rupee. So we'll have to spend more of rupees. That is what we'll have to understand. So this is a very important, serious scenario. And because of this, what has happened is RBI has intervened. How RBI has intervened? It has basically sold dollars to stabilize the value of rupee. So we are having the foreign exchange reserves. It was almost $581 billion. And this has now reduced to almost $552 billion. Why? Because RBI has sold dollars. So as to make sure that there is no scarcity of dollars. That is what you'll have to understand. Forest reserves have fallen down. Next pressure is that we have the foreign institutional investors. Now, they are not viewing the investment options in India as something which is going to give them a good return. So what they're again doing is they're going to invest in their own countries, in their advanced economies. So again, this is increasing the value of demand of dollars, and therefore this commensurate value of dollars. And we are witnessing the depreciation of Indian rupee. That is what you'll have to understand. Now, all these factors combined, fertilizers, energy, gold, foreign institutional investors, ultimately what it is leading to is that there is a rising current account deficit. It was almost 1.5%. And it has increased to almost, there are projections that it would increase to almost 2.4% of GDP. So this is obviously not something which is quite good for an economy like India, right? Why CAD is dangerous, current account deficit is dangerous? Because this would lead to more of depreciation of the Indian rupee, right? And this would again lead to the vicious trap. Next, we have imported inflation. We would see the rise of inflationary trends. And that would have effect on the end price of that particular commodity or a good. and therefore the brunt has to be borne by the end consumer, right? Next, pressure on forex reserves. You just saw that RBI has sold a lot of US dollars to stabilize the Indian rupee. But that is not, we are not witnessing that Indian rupee has stabilized to that level. So that is also one of the concerns. External vulnerability. So now we are looking at the picture from the angle of the increase in the prices of the crude oil, for example. But let's say if the supplies suddenly stop, what would India do? We don't even have that much of the reserves. We don't have that much of the strategic petroleum reserves, which countries like Japan have, which countries like China have or South Korea have. So that is what you'll have to understand. Reduced investor confidence. All these factors combined, they do not reflect a good picture about the macroeconomic stability. And therefore, ultimately what happens is that investors are not really willing to invest in India. And those who have already invested, now they're basically taking their money out and investing in different countries. So that is what you'll have to understand. Measures taken by the government. Gold import curbs. So the import duty has been hiked. It has increased from 9.2% to 18.4%. But let's see what the results would be. But many of the commentators, what they're saying is that this would not have much effect on the consumption of gold. Then we have fuel price hike. Almost by 3 rupees, the price has been hiked of petrol and diesel, by 2 rupees of CNG. Then we have symbolic measures, which really work great in a country like India. So we have seen the Honorable Prime Minister reducing the convoy, Home Minister doing so. We have many of the chief ministers following that. So these are symbolic measures. And again, they're important, definitely. Will these measures work? See, what you'll have to understand is that definitely there is a cohort of people who would really follow what the Prime Minister have said. And this would definitely reduce the fuel usage. And this would increase the reliance of people on the electric vehicles, 100%. And also we have the work from home, we have the public transport facilities, carpooling, which people would definitely try to do. So definitely it is going to have some effect. Next, import compression of those goods or commodities which are not really important, non-essential. Imports of those goods and commodities can be avoided, right? Next, we have long-term behavioral change. So in short term, it may not reflect, but now there are people who are literate, who have knowledge, who are basically aware, and they really give importance to what Prime Minister is saying. So this can have a long-term behavioral change. In terms of, for example, let's say that we should rely more on the natural farming. We should rely more on the organic fertilizers, not chemical fertilizers. We should opt for carpooling. We should go for public transport. So definitely it can have a long-term behavioral change. But what are the limitations and challenges? And government what it is doing is that it is saying that we want people to reduce the consumption of oil and gas, right? So therefore we are hiking the prices. But what you'll have to understand is if this thing happens, ultimately there would be the inflationary trends. Because once the price of the petrol or the diesel or the CNG increase, this would have an effect on the logistics. And therefore the final price of that good or commodity is going to increase. So ultimately the end consumer has to bear the brunt. And there would be the inflationary pressures which would hurt the lowest economic category the most. Then we have gold demand may continue. And this we have seen in the times of 2013. Whenever the government has tried to increase the import duty, what we have witnessed is the smuggling, primarily through the Nepal corridor, smuggling of gold. There are informal channels which develop. And there is, again, what you'll have to understand is that there is the nexus of even some of the officials. There are officials who are involved. And this would again lead to more of corruption. So this is a kind of a vicious cycle. Natural fertilizer shift is difficult. Yes, in a country like India, it is difficult. Why? You'll have to understand. Many of the agricultural scientists, what they say is that the soil quality in India has already been degraded. Soil is no more resilient. It has lost its own potential. And therefore, what the soil needs is more and more of these chemical fertilizers. Now, you cannot have a scenario where the farmer would compromise his earnings for the sake of the sustainability. Understand, this is a very practical aspect. The farmer is not going to compromise his or her profit for the sake of sustainability or whatever the Prime Minister is saying. Though usage of natural farming or organic fertilizers is really very important, but we don't see that thing coming suddenly. That would take its own time, right? Reduce yields. Also, what you'll have to understand is that there are projections of El Nino. There are projections of weak monsoons. So this is not something which would make the farmers to go for natural farming or to go for the organic fertilizers. No. Travel is not the main problem. Yes. And this is a trend which we are witnessing. Indians, previously a lot of Indians used to travel abroad. Now their numbers had, just before 1 or 2 days, the Hindu covered this. Because this is not the real problem. Travel for the vacations and for the leisure purpose has in fact reduced. Instead, what Indians are doing is they're investing more in the real estate outside, in the equities, in the debt instruments. So there is an increasing trend of the investments by Indians abroad, and there is a decreasing trend of Indians going abroad for travel purpose. So this is something which would hardly work, right? Now, ये सब चीजें ठीक हैं, but what is the larger issue? Are we, by saying all this, if Prime Minister is saying that do this, do that, that may have a short-term effect. But are we looking at the bigger issue? Are we targeting the roots? See, what you'll have to understand is that the larger structural issue is with respect to the manufacturing competitiveness. And this is very, very important. We haven't been able to touch or match the export potential or the export efficiency or the efficacy of countries like Vietnam or Bangladesh. Let alone, we're not talking about China. And it's not like that we can't do. We have the potential. But we often say that there has been a kind of a jobless growth in India. We have transitioned almost directly from the agrarian sector to the services-led economy, where we have almost forgotten the manufacturing aspect. And manufacturing plays a very important role. So if we don't manufacture on our own, see, we understand we have issues with respect to the oil. We have an import dependency. But what about the huge electronics or the electrical supplies we are importing from other countries? Why can't we manufacture those things in India itself? Active pharmaceutical ingredients. We are importing almost 70% of the APIs are being imported from China. So there is this manufacturing aspect. We'll have to focus on the manufacturing competitiveness. And in the budget 2025-26, the government came up with the National Manufacturing Mission. National Manufacturing Mission, where the government said that by the year 2035, we would increase the manufacturing shares in the overall GDP to almost 25%. And the focus would be more on the MSMEs, which are the lifeblood of the Indian economy, which have a substantial share as far as the overall export, overall domestic production is concerned. So what we'll have to understand is that the government has come up with this, but we'll have to make sure that we give due importance to domestic manufacturing. And definitely the government is working on that. We have the PLI scheme, we have so many other schemes, production-linked incentive schemes. We have a lot of schemes for the MSMEs. But more of it has to be done. More of it has to be done so that we can basically optimize. See, those things which we can easily produce in our own country, there is no need for importing them, but still we are doing so. So this is a point of concern. What should be the way forward? So we can break this into three parts: the short term, the long term, and the medium term. Short term, medium term, long term. In the short term, what you'll have to understand is we'll have to diversify the oil suppliers. We're talking about the diversification of the supply lines. We cannot be, see, again, for example, let's talk about South Korea. It has come into contracts with various countries around the world, and therefore it is not witnessing much of these implications. But India is witnessing that because we are heavily reliant on the West Asia. So we'll have to diversify the suppliers. Second thing is promote public transport. Very, very important. Public transport has to be increased. Next, stabilize rupee. For that, we'll have to go with different macroeconomic interventions. And it's not just the RBI who will have to work on this part. Even the government would have to work on this part. Rationalize the imports. Rationalize the imports means that do not import those non-essential items. Only import the essential items. Medium term, expand the renewable energy. Yes. Because if you are dependent on more of these fossil-based energy sources, So definitely these things would, again, they can continue, they can happen again, right? So therefore we'll have to expand the renewable energy, and for that we'll have to especially focus on the domestic manufacturing of the solar modules and components, including the wind energy components and the other renewable energy measures. Increase domestic manufacturing. Yes, overall we'll have to focus on domestic manufacturing so that we reduce our reliance on other countries. In true sense, if you'll have to be self-reliant, you'll have to reduce the imports of these items, finished products from various countries, specifically China. Boosts the export competitiveness, provides various alternatives, provides various incentives to the exporters. And we'll have to make sure that we are not only domestically competitive, rather we'll have to make sure that we are competitive on an international scale. If you are manufacturing a particular t-shirt, you'll have to make sure that that is competitive once we compare that with the product from Vietnam or Bangladesh. That is what you'll have to understand. Reduce gold dependency through the financial instruments. For example, we have sovereign gold bonds. We have various schemes by the government. Why not invest in those alternatives? Why you need to buy the gold? That's the point. Long-term energy security. We'll have to focus on the energy security aspect because this forms a very core of national security. By energy security, we are trying to say that diversify the energy sources, first of all. Diversify the suppliers. Make sure that we are more focused on indigenous development of energy. So that is again a point. For example, what we can do is we can explore more of the hydrocarbons which we have in India. Krishna Godavari basin, the oil resources, or in the Arabian Sea. More of exploration is needed. Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India. And this is, again, we'll have to focus. We are doing it in defense sector, we are doing it in various sectors, but we'll have to focus on a robust, what China did. There was a rapid pace of development, especially a lot of focus was given on manufacturing, especially after Deng Xiaoping policies. So therefore, we'll have to also go with that rapid pace of development, especially the manufacturing sector. Export-led growth, what countries like Bangladesh or Vietnam or these East Asian economies are doing. Take for instance, Japan or South Korea. They have developed the very base on relying on export-led model. Export of highly technologically advanced products and services, right? Green transition, very important. Green transition is important, and so that we reduce our reliance. Let's talk about the electric vehicles. So if we'll have more of these electric vehicles, obviously there would be a reduction in the demand of the fossil fuel. So what you'll have to understand is whatever the PM has said, it is 100% right. But this can only be a short-term remedy. It cannot be a panacea. It cannot be a remedy for a long term. Therefore, we'll have to focus on a long-term scenario, and we'll have to make sure that we focus on the structural aspect, on domestic manufacturing aspect. So the government should come up with various policy interventions, and it's not just the government, including the private sector, because not everything can be done by the government. The private sector would have to invest in different domains. It has to increase the overall capex, capital expenditure, so that more of jobs are provided, more of jobs come into the open market, and more of investment is done in various domains. That is what you'll have to understand. Let's talk about a question. Geopolitical conflicts expose India's structural vulnerabilities arising from high import dependency on energy, gold, and fertilizers. In this context, examine the implications of a rising current account deficit on the Indian economy, discuss the effectiveness and limitations of recent government measures aimed at reducing the import dependence and strengthening the macroeconomic stability. Very important interdisciplinary question. Try to write an answer for this, because as I've always said, there is no alternative to writing. The more you write, the more you practice, the more are the chances of success. So invest a lot as far as writing is concerned. This is again the most important and indispensable part. And yes, if you're liking the initiative, do not forget to press the like button, and also let us know in the comments. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is about logistics, India's growth engine. Now we have Ministry of Commerce. It has come up with a particular index known as LEADS, what it transforms as logistics ease across different states. So it has released the numbers for 2025, and what it talks about is that how efficiently various states are dealing with the logistics aspect. We'll see what logistics is all about. Delhi has been placed in exemplary category, and in this particular context, we have the Delhi Chief Minister who has said that we would make Delhi as a logistical hub, right? So let's talk about what is logistics, what are the challenges involved in a country like India, why we are focusing on reducing the cost with respect to logistics. What is the scenario we have and what should be the way forward? Very important topic. Government to unveil policy to transform Delhi into a logistics hub. CM has said about this particular report. Now, let's talk about what do we mean by logistics. See, we have various inputs. We have raw materials, then we have the finished products, we have the intermediate goods. Now we have the supply of these raw materials or the intermediate goods or the finished goods from point A to point B, then point C, point D. From the very starting of that particular product in the form of the raw materials to the very end of it, there are a lot of processes which are involved. Transportation, packaging, freight, insurance, all these cumulatively in a very composite manner form the part of the overall logistics. Let's talk about this. Let's say we have the transport by air, then we have the delivery, we have the trucks, we have the tankers, we have the control, we have the shipping, we have the warehouse for storing. You must have heard about the cold storages, right? We have the packaging, we have the loader, we have the transportation, everything forms the very composite part of the logistics. So if I were to give you the definition, the organization, coordination, storage and transportation of various resources, including the raw materials, the intermediate goods and the finished products. That is what you'll have to understand. We have the World Bank, which comes up with a particular index, which is Logistics Performance Index. What it looks into is the speed of trade, how efficiently and quickly things are moving from point A to point B, how efficiently things are being done, what is the speed of the travel. And on that basis, it comes with a particular indicator. The good thing is that India has significantly improved its ranking as far as the LPI is concerned, Logistics Performance Indicator. And in the year 2023, it ranked 38th position out of 139 countries. So it has significantly improved since 2014. Also, if I were to give you the number, the valuation of the logistics sector in India, in the year 2021, it was almost $215 billion, right? So this is what you'll have to understand. This was a valuation, and also to give you the progress of this particular sector, the growth of this particular sector, it is having almost a compound annual growth rate of 10%, more than 10%. So this augurs well for the whole industry. Now, if I were to give you the segment breakup, and this is on the basis of the KPMG report, we have almost 73%, and the year we're talking about financial year 21. Almost 70% is attributed to the road. Then we have almost 18% attributed to the rail. Then we have water, and then we have others. Then let's talk about the structure, and this is very important. What is the overall structure of the logistics sector? Just 10% of the players in the sector are organized. They are formalized. Rest 90%, they form the unorganized part. They're not formal. So this is also one of the issues with respect to logistics sector. We'll talk about that. So this is the overall context in which we are talking about the logistics sector. Now, what are the issues which are faced by the logistics sector? Let's talk about the issues. The very first thing you'll have to understand is, as I told you, that there is the dominance of unorganized and small players in the overall sector. Now, what it means? It means that there are very few players in the overall supply chain who have the adequate capital, who have the adequate resources, who have the adequate operational lines. See, understand, in logistics, one thing which really matters is the operational efficiency. आप कितने efficient हैं from point A to point B, how efficiently you can transport the products. Once we talk about the large players, they have adequate skilled manpower. They have the infusion or integration of technology in their whole processes. They have very efficient transporters. So therefore, they tend to have low operational costs, and they tend to be more operationally efficient. Whereas once we talk about the small players, first of all, they're not registered with the government. They do not follow the protocols. They do not have that much capital with them. so as to infuse more of capital and make their processes more efficient. So this leads to a situation where the overall costs increase, and ultimately the final burden has to be borne by the consumer. So there is the dominance. So what is really needed is that we need to formalize most of these players who are unorganized. ठीक है? And this ultimately leads to lack of scale. भाई जिसके पास पैसा है, the entity in the market, the entity in the logistics sector who has adequate capital with it can invest in technology, can invest in various interventions so as to make the whole process more efficient. But that would not be possible for a person who don't have, for an entity who don't have the adequate capital in the logistics. Okay. Next, logistics cost higher than the global average. Now, this has been a persistent concern. If you'll compare, definitely we have made a lot of progress as far as the reduction of the overall logistics cost is concerned. But if you compare the logistics cost of India with that of a country like Germany or US, it's still much higher. Over there, the logistics cost in Germany or the US, it ranges from almost 6 to 8%. In India, it is still, and it is debated, but still people say that it's almost around 10 to 11%. It has reduced from 12 to 13, but still around 10 to 11%. So this is a serious concern, because if logistics costs would be more, ultimately the end consumer would have to bear the burden. Next is challenges in the estimation of logistics cost. Again, very, very important concern. The whole sector is so complex that it is very difficult to estimate. That's what I said. I told you that at some places you will read that it has already reached in single digits. For example, one of the papers of National Council for Applied Economic Research, it says, a very important body, and it says that the logistics cost in India in the year 2021 was almost 7.5% in 21. Last year, the Minister for Road Transport and Highways, last year in 2025, he said that in the next 5 years, we would bring the logistics cost to single digit. Now, one of the entities is already saying that it is in single digit. So how come the minister is saying the other thing? Because of the estimation issues. There are certain entities in the country who estimate the overall logistics costs in double digits, whereas we have the institutions like NCIER who basically estimate at 7.5%. So there are differences. Next is skewed model mix. As I just told you, if we talk about the figures of 2021, look at this. There is a dominance of the road in the overall share, in the modal mix. Or why this is so? You'll have to understand. Because once we talk about the road, it provides the end-to-end connectivity. Road transport provides end-to-end connectivity. And that is not possible with the other modes of communication, be it the railways, be it the inland waterways, be it the coastal waterways. So this is the advantage of the roadways. But it has its own issues in terms of that since you are greatly dependent on the roadways, on the road transport, on this particular mode, you will have more of congestion. You already know what is the condition in some of the busiest areas of Delhi, the commercial hotspots. It would lead to more of emissions because you are using the diesel fuel or you're using the petrol or the other things. So it leads to more of congestion, more of emissions, more of pollution. So this is what you'll have to understand. Loss of rail freight share. Now, the government has been trying to increase the share of the rail in the overall transport, but it's not fructifying. Why? Because understand that the investment which is required in the rail connectivity, it is too huge. If you have to connect one remote corner, one remote location with the other, it would require a lot of cost. There would be a lot of time which would require for the construction of that particular project. And even the National Rail Plan, NRP of 2030, it has a target that by the year 2035, it is targeting that the share of the rail should increase almost to 45%, which is almost at this point of time, it's almost 20%. So you're going to increase almost double the share of the rail in the overall freight. One more issue is that it does not provide the end-to-end connectivity. ये भी एक issue है, ठीक है? Next is inadequate and inefficient warehousing. We may have storages we may have the facilities, but they are very obsolete. They're not technologically advanced. You must have seen that in some of the advanced economies, they're having highly efficient storage facilities, cold storage facilities, especially for the perishable items. And even for the non-perishable items, they have a very good supply chain, operational supply chain. But we don't have that because that requires a lot of capital. And that is the reason you must have seen that even in the inventories which we have, sometimes there is the news of the breakage of that particular item or commodity. So there are issues with respect to the warehousing. Then variations among the states. See, once we are talking about, once a good is coming from, let's say, from US to Delhi, it would cross the oceans. Let's say it's coming to JNPT port, Mumbai. And then from there, it would come via the rail or the road to Delhi. So there are multiple states which are the stakeholders. It's not like only Maharashtra or Delhi is a participant. But there are variations among different states as far as logistics efficiency is considered. A state A may not perform to that level, to what level state B is performing. Why? Because different states are at different levels of development. Different states have different priorities. So we'll have to make sure that there has to be a uniform lens through which we look at the logistics aspect. And over here, the union government plays a very important role so that it can incentivize various states to come up with various policy interventions so as to enhance the overall logistics. Okay? Now, what have been the government schemes and initiatives? The very first is PM Gati Shakti initiative. Again, there are multiple ministries, multiple departments which are involved. So as to make sure that the ministries or the departments don't work in silos. So as to make sure that there is proper coordination among various ministries and departments. This platform has been working. So the very objective of this platform is to make sure that there is efficiency, there is proper coordination among various departments to break the silos, reduce the logistics costs, and enhance the overall economic growth. That is a very objective. National Logistics Policy of 2022. Now, Ministry of Commerce came up with the National Logistics Policy. The very objective was to make sure that we need to increase the last mile delivery and make the whole operations very efficient. Integrate technology in the processes. Make sure that various players who are there, for example, the transporters, they must be regularized. They must be registered so that they can also get the benefit of the government policies, saving time and cost overruns, rapid infrastructure development. This is something which really it's worth praising. India has, especially under the guidance of the former Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, we started with the National Highways Development Program, NHDP. And ultimately what we have seen is there has been a rapid development of the national highways across India. So this is something which we should be praising. And it's really something which, a feat which India has achieved. And recently we have come up with various programs, for example, Bharatmala, to have a 4-lane connectivity all over India. Sagarmala, which talks about the port-led development, in order to basically optimize or capitalize the efficiencies, the operational efficiencies of the ports, various ports in the country, right? Rapid integration of technology. You must be aware of the fast tags. Initially, there used to be long queues. Even now we have the long queues, but still the time of processing has reduced a lot because of the fast tags, because of this RFID, radio frequency identification. Similarly, we have the NICDC tags. It stands for National Industrial Corridor Development Corporation. So NSIDC has given tags to various containers. So with the help of that, you can track the position of those containers, right, on that particular industrial corridors. Enhance warehousing capacity. Warehousing capacity, especially for institutions like Central Warehousing Corporation, has been enhanced. And it is now leasing, the CWC is leasing its facilities to many of the private players, for example, Videocon or LG. So therefore, we have focused on the warehouse capacity. Dedicated freight corridors, look at this. Let's talk about the Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor and the Western. So they are specifically, as the name says, a dedicated freight corridor. They are specifically focusing upon the quick and fast and efficient movement of the freight, of the goods and commodities from one point to the other. So this is what you'll have to understand. Next, we have the GST and the e-way bill. GST has really made, as we talk about the one nation, one market, it has basically plugged the loopholes, not to the full extent, but still it has done a lot of, it has made the whole paradigm quite better, whole scenario quite better. For example, we have the e-way bill. So this is what you'll have to understand. Logistics data bank. Again, because of this, we can have more of efficient policy making. See, over here we discussed in the estimation of the costs, because we don't know about the players who are involved. So once we'll have a proper data bank, then it would be quite easy for us to estimate the overall cost, to come up with the exact policy intervention which is needed. So again, these are the steps which have been taken. What should be the way forward? Now, this is the 25 report which we're talking about, and Delhi has been featured in the exemplars, right, for the UTs. Adopting advanced technology is very, very important. As I told you in the very first article, we cannot just compete domestically. We talk about cooperative federalism and competitive federalism, where the states must cooperate and compete with each other. But now, if you want to become a manufacturing superpower, a manufacturing base in the world, hub in the world, you will have to be competent. You'll have to be competitive in comparison to countries like China or the other countries, East Asian countries. For that, you'll have to integrate technology. By blockchain ho gaya, big data, cloud computing, artificial intelligence, supply chain, robotics. So this must be done. And this would enhance the operational efficiency. For example, we have Indian Customs Electronic Gateway. So the government is also adopting the technology. Very important. Sustainable logistics. See, we cannot be reliant on these fossil fuels for a long. We'll have to make sure that there is transition. And energy efficiency should be there. You must have heard about the long haul transport. Let's say there's a carriage, a particular truck coming from Chennai to Delhi. We have the long haul transport. Why not we come up with alternative energy supplies, fuel cell batteries or solar batteries, anything which basically reduces the overall consumption of these fossil fuels, right? Carbon ratings can be done, emission trading system can be developed for the logistics sector. Okay. Then we have the enhanced investments, very important. As I told you in the very first article, not everything can be done by the government. We'll have to include the private sector also, because private sector does two things. It can provide the funds, and second, it can provide the managerial expertise. The expertise with respect to the execution of the project. Over here we've talked about the project management. So this is again very important. We have the national infrastructure pipeline. Look at this. We have almost 39% being contributed to this by the center. Private sector, again very important, 22%, state 39%. And there are various sectors which we're talking about. We're talking about the energy, we're talking about the roads, we're talking about the irrigation, rural agriculture, mobility, railway, digital infrastructure, ports and airports. So this is what the infrastructure pipeline we have basically given a target. We've given this target to ourselves, that we are going to have this much of investment in these varied sectors by these stakeholders. Okay? Foreign direct investments in the logistics. We have many of the players, foreign investors who are coming and investing in different logistics supply chains in India. That must be encouraged. Then improved project management. For this, we have a lot of project consultancies. So their expertise can be used. We have many of the players in Germany, in the US, who have made small changes in the overall supply chains, and they have got huge results with respect to the supply chains. So why not we consider that? Why not we learn those project management skills from these countries? So this is what you'll have to understand. And this is what the Leeds 2025 report says. It has placed Delhi in the exemplars. We have Tamil Nadu, we have Uttar Pradesh, landlocked states, and Mizoram also. Different categories of states. So what we are saying is logistics plays a very important role in the overall supply chain aspect. And therefore, it is indispensable. The reduction of the overall logistics costs, it's indispensable to make sure that our products compete not just domestically, but also internationally. And we also achieve the idea of Viksit Bharat, because that is very, very important. Let's have a mains practice question, a small question. India's logistics landscape is witnessing rapid strides in various domains. However, various issues still plague the overall sector. Elaborate. 10 marks, 150 words. Please write, because this is again very important, and that is how you improve your answer writing abilities. Let's go to the next section. Coming to the prelims pointer section, we have the very first topic, which deals with a very important body known as Directorate of Revenue Intelligence. What the article says is, the Directorate of Revenue Intelligence has seized cocaine worth 13.2 crores from two passengers in separate operations at Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport, officials said on Saturday. So let's go through what this body is all about. DRI was constituted in 1957 as an apex anti-smuggling intelligence and investigating agency. It works under the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, Ministry of Finance. It enforces the provisions of the Customs Act 62 and 50 other allied acts, including the Arms Act, NDPS, Conservation of Foreign Exchange and Prevention of Smuggling Activities, Wildlife Act and other acts. It is tasked with detecting and curbing the smuggling of contraband, those items which are forbidden, including the drug trafficking and illicit international trade in wildlife and environmentally sensitive items, as well as combating commercial frauds related to international trade and evasion of custom duty. It has a country-wide network of zonal, regional and sub-regional offices. It collects, analyzes and distributes the intelligence to the field formations, helps investigations and keeps the statistics of seizures, whatever it seizes, and prizes for watching trends of smuggling and movement of other contraband, suggests remedies for fixing the loopholes. DRI has been designated as a lead agency for SCORD, that is the National Anti-Smuggling Coordination Center. DRI has also been at the forefront in the international customs collaboration through the Customs Mutual Assistance Agreements of CBIC with almost 60 other countries, where the focus is on information exchange and learning from the best practices of different administrations. So therefore, this becomes important, can be asked in the prelims. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, here's a mention of a species of a bird known as barn swallows. What you'll have to understand is, previously there was an assumption. It was assumed that this particular species of bird, it's of migratory nature. But now there are some studies which reveal that this particular bird species has acclimatized itself and has made Manipur as its own permanent home. Let's go through this, very important, because species has always been one of the favorite areas of UPSC to trap. Descendants of migratory barn swallows may have gradually stopped making long journeys and settled permanently in Manipur's Imphal Valley. The barn swallow, and this is the scientific name, you can just have a look, is a widespread synanthrope that has expanded its range across continents. What you'll have to understand, what do we mean by synanthrope is, see, we have the domesticated animals, for example, dogs. But there are some animals, some species which are not domesticated, but which live in close connections with the humans, so that they can benefit from the human society, right? Human living. Though they are not domesticated, but still they benefit from the human population that has expanded its range across continents. In India, 2 subspecies of barn swallows are reported to breed in the Himalayas, while one is believed to winter in parts of the country's northeastern region. Let's go through this. The scientists suggest 2 possible explanations. There are 2 explanations which have been given, can be asked in the UPSC in the form of a statement, for why the Imphal Valley birds challenge the understanding of barn swallows, because we generally assume that they are of migratory nature, but why they have stayed over here. One is that these birds shed the migratory trait of their ancestors to settle down in the valley that offers the ideal conditions in terms of the climate. A mild climate, plentiful flying insects and structures suitable for building their cup-shaped mud nest. You can just have a look. This is cup-shaped mud nest. The other is the impact of interbreeding of different groups over thousands of years. The scientists did not rule out the role of local culture in the bird's evolution from temporary to permanent residence. The Meitei community, a Tibeto-Burman ethnic group native to Manipur, regards the barn swallow as a symbol of goddess Lakshmi. So people respect it. So therefore, automatically, there is a tendency of making sure that the bird is not affected. The populations are not affected. And good fortune, prosperity and good fortune. This belief translates into strong protection of the nests and barn swallows within the private properties, likely contributing to the persistence of breeding populations in densely inhabited areas of Imphal Valley. can be asked. So this is in the area of Imphal Valley, do remember, right? Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, as we discussed in the very second article, here's a mention of the Leeds Index. Delhi has been placed in the exemplary category in the Logistics Ease Across Different States 2025 Index. The Leeds Index, prepared by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, do remember, can be asked in the UPSC. Very important. This Department of for the Promotion of Industry and Industrial Trade, Internal Trade, it comes within the Ministry of Commerce. Very important. Under the Ministry of Commerce and Industries, evaluates the states and UTs on the parameters such as logistics infrastructure, logistics services, regulatory framework, digital integration, sustainability, and stakeholder perception. Under the index, whose results were released earlier this week, states and UTs are classified into 4 categories: exemplary, high performer, accelerators, and growth seekers. So therefore, this becomes important. Let's have a go through this. Leeds is a flagship assessment of the logistics performance across states and UTs, released by the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. The LEAPS 2025 Logistics Excellence Advancements and Performance Shield awards were also given across 13 categories covering core logistics, MSMEs, startups, special categories, etc. It was conceived on the lines of the Logistics Performance Index of the World Bank in 2018. Leeds 2025 provides a 4-tier performance framework. Earlier, there was a 3-tier. It uses objective indicators, nearly 59% weightage, like regulatory support, logistics enablers, perception indicators such as logistics infrastructure, services, and sustainable logistics. You can just have a look. We have the states. Now, we have the category of coastal states. In the exemplar category, we have Tamil Nadu. In the landlocked, we have UP. Very good. Northeastern states, Mizoram, right? And in UTs, we have Delhi as exemplar, right? Performing very good. High performers, you can just have a look, accelerators and growth seekers. Initiatives to strengthen the logistics sector. National Logistics Policy 2022 aims to lower the cost of logistics in par with other developed countries, for example, Germany or the US. PM Gati Shakti National Master Plan, Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan to ensure seamless movement of people and goods. Logistics Data Bank 2.0 syncs with the Unified Logistics Interface Platform, ULIP. The APIs offering exporters and MSMEs real-time visibility across the road, rail, and sea routes. Others, dedicated freight corridors, strengthening of the multimodal and integrated logistics ecosystems. Then we have multimodal logistics parks, MMLPs, and e-waybill system, which has its root in the GST. Infrastructure status to logistics sector, Logistics Efficiency Enhancement Program, LEEP. So these are the things which you can also use in the mains answer. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic is a mention of the Narcotics Control Bureau. The Narcotics Control Bureau has busted an international drug trafficking syndicate with seizure of 227.7 kilograms of Captagon, estimated at about 182 crores. A Syrian national allegedly involved in the network was arrested. The contraband was allegedly being routed through India to West Asian countries, particularly Saudi Arabia. Let's talk about the Narcotics Control Bureau. It's the nodal drug enforcement and intelligence agencies under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Do remember this. It was constituted on 14th November 1985 under the provisions of Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985, NDPS. Headquarters are in New Delhi. Functions: coordination among the various central and state agencies, assisting states in enhancing their drug law enforcement, collection and dissemination of intelligence, analysis of seizure data, study trends and modus operandi, how things operate in these drug networks, preparation of national drug enforcement statistics, liaison with the international agencies such as UN, DCP, INCB, Interpol, Customs, Cooperation Council, etc. National contact point for intelligence and investigations. Also functions as enforcement agency through its zonal offices. So therefore, just keep a track. Question can be asked from this particular topic. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion has a mention of the national testing agencies. We already know what the status is. There have been people have been protesting about the way in which NTA has carried out the NEET exam. There are allegations that there is a nexus. NTA is not properly accountable to the parliament or to the government, and because of that there are some loopholes. Now they are forcing children are being made to follow the strict guidelines, but what about the structure of the NTA? which has led to the compromise of one of the most important exams in the country, right? So that is the NEET exam. So therefore, many of the doctors' associations have said that there's a need to have NTA as a statutory body. Understand, this is basically right now, it is registered as a society. And this is what the beauty of the article is. The article itself talks about that. Let's go through this. The United Doctors Front on Saturday moved the Supreme Court seeking transition of the National Testing Agency from a registered society to a statutory body established by an Act of Parliament to ensure constitutional and parliamentary accountability. The doctors' body said that the 2026 paper leak was a part of recurring, systemic and catastrophic failure of the NTA in conducting the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test undergraduate. The NTA's current legal status as an autonomous society, so it's basically an autonomous society, can be asked in the prelims, under the Societies Registration Act of 1860 creates an accountability vacuum. There's no accountability. The body said that unlike the Union Public Service Commission or the Staff Selection Commission, the NTA was not directly answerable to the Parliament. It operated under the Ministry of Education, which shielded the agency from direct CAG audits and mandatory parliamentary committee probes. So there has to be an enhancement in the overall accountability framework according to this particular body of doctors. This statutory shift would ensure direct parliamentary oversight. The chairperson and the functions would be defined by the law, making it directly answerable to the legislature. This would ensure financial transparency, thorough and mandatory end-to-end CAG audits, statutory penalties for leaks and legally mandated grievance redressal mechanism, while eliminating the outsourcing ambiguities by restricting the role of private vendors in the core examination functions. Because that is one of the allegations. People are saying that there is a role of the private vendors and that serves as a loophole. And therefore, we have to make sure that we have a foolproof structure, a very robust structure as far as the NTA is concerned. So here we come at the end of the discussion. I hope you really liked it. All the very best. Thank you.